Hey, friends of ours, let's talk a little Donnie Brasco. Now, as a retired cop with a 20-year career who spent another 4 years after that teaching leadership all over the US and Canada, I've come into contact with a lot of law enforcement agencies. Now, honestly, these organizations are just chock full of good people who work hard and do their best. But any bureaucracy is like any other bureaucracy, and mission drift is a real thing. Now, so, what does this have to do with Donnie Brasco, you might ask? Well, sadly, one of the most realistic scenes for me, from a law enforcement perspective, in the entire movie was the one in which a distracted leader gives Joe Pistone an award for his service in a very hurried fashion. I mean, this guy gave up years of his life facing constant danger the entire time, and the FBI ceremony that honored him took less time than you're taking to watch this video. I don't know how accurate a portrayal that was to Pistone's actual experience. If you do, by the way, please share it in the comments. But unfortunately, this kind of bungling is all too common in bureaucracies and in the law enforcement profession on the bureaucratic side as well. A thoughtful leader will make sure something like this doesn't happen. Uh, to a valued employee. But anyway, it's probably the most realistic scene in a movie full of realistic scenes. Now, the best scene is when Johnny Depp explains, "Forget about it." Do you know if that's accurate with the Joe Pistone award ceremony being super rushed and
I know he became really jaded with the FBI. He left at one point, just because he didn't feel appreciated, and he started having troubles with officers above him, like telling him how to do his job. I'm like, I was undercover for how many years? Like the most successful undercover job probably in American history, and you're telling me how to do things, and he just got fed up with it. If you actually listen to Joe Pistone talk, he has a very like I totally believe that he was that successful at playing a mob guy because he has a very kind of like street talk, working class type vibe to him. He really does. You hear him talk, and I know how old is he now? He's like 70. You hear him talk though, and he sounds like a guy you don't want to mess with.
well, we showed that video in the leadership course that I taught, and as just as a warning, I suppose, as a don't do this sort of thing, because it's such a simple thing to recognize people who do good work in a way that's meaningful, and just the slapdashery way in that scene with the official who could barely be bothered to be there, and and then they gave him $500, which just don't even give you any money, I think, in that scenario, because $500 is like kind of an insult after 6 years or whatever he spent undercover. I mean, that's like $80 a year. I mean, it's just, I don't know. It always struck me as like, wow, I've seen that exact scene play out in real life on a smaller scale. And it's just sad because it's like self-inflicted. As a leader, you don't, you have total control over that. It's not like, a
Yeah.
disaster that's happening from outside or a crisis that's being thrust upon you. This is just taking an extra 3 minutes and a little bit of emotional energy to make it meaningful for somebody who deserves it. So maybe it's just me, but that was always the movie scene, part of the movie that seemed realistic and kind of ticked me off at the same time.
It's kind of weird that you treat a professional like that, that somebody who's done their job and even more so of their job, their duty, and then you give them a publisher's clearinghouse check.
Give them a subscription to the Columbia Records and
Yeah.
Tapes Club, Jelly of the Month Club.
For sure, yeah, he left totally, and then he ended up rejoining, and he ended up having to redo all the stuff again. Like he had to take the written test again. He had to do the physicals and everything. When he decided that he was going to rejoin, so he was 100% out.
Did he write an autobiography about this?
Yeah, he has one. Yeah, that he wrote himself. Donnie called Donnie Brasco. He actually wrote. Didn't you say this, Steve? I never read it, but like, didn't he write a book about it was like a sequel to like Donnie Brasco.
I think he wrote some, crime fiction as Donnie Brasco.
So yeah, and he has like he does a podcast with, I think it was like he's like an actor slash movie producer. He's been in a couple films. I listened to a bit of it when we were researching for episodes, and it's worth listening. It's good to listen to. You know, you get a I don't know. I mean, Joe Pistone seems like a pretty fun guy. You know, he seems like the type of guy I'd enjoy having a beer with, and even though he doesn't drink, which is, he's like very adamant about that. He doesn't he'll have a beer or something like that, but he doesn't drink alcohol like at all, and he talks about that actually in his when he was undercover, like, oh, how did this work, like, you're hanging out with these mob guys and they all drank and nobody thought it was weird. He's like, oh, they thought it was weird, but then you're just honest, he's like, oh, I don't drink, and people just kind of like, oh, whatever, Donnie doesn't drink, and then they just go with it. And
Yeah, especially for the time that it took place too. I mean, it would be no big deal today, but this was the 80s, right? Early 90s.
yeah, that's one of the good things that they showed and they did in the movie too, is if you watch it again, you notice that Donnie never drinks, doesn't smoke cigarettes either. Obviously that's like a big thing with like him being sick of the cigarettes in the car and stuff like that. But yeah, Joe Pistone was yeah, he was straight edge, right? I mean, that's the modern saying now. He didn't drink, didn't smoke, didn't do any drugs, nothing. He's always in pretty good shape. He was always in good shape, always fantastic shape. Actually, maybe that's one reason he got like some respect from a lot of these mob guys, because truthfully, he could probably beat the crap out of them, one on one in a fight, you know. So, which
I
a
think
lot of these mob guys probably weren't used to. They're tough guys, right? They're from the streets. They grew up, fighting for a living, right? Not a living, but getting into fist fights and the whole 9 yards. And Joe could probably beat them up. You know,
I think they probably also respected his convictions. I mean, people respect someone who has, strong conviction and sticks to it, and even if they don't agree with it. So yeah, he doesn't drink, he doesn't smoke. That's crazy because I love a beer and I smoke like a chimney, but damn if he doesn't stick to it, and so they respect that kind of thing. So throw that in there with the fact that I don't want to say anything because he can probably knock me on my keister, then you get that situation where he gets a little room.
well, I get that from work too, because I work like a pretty blue collar job, right? And I don't drink like at all. I don't do anything. And then I mean, I think people think it's a little weird, but then over enough time, they just kind of I think they've come to just respect that about me, is the fact that, like, I don't do any of those things.
If you like this video, please click like and subscribe so you can be let in on it when another one drops. And meanwhile, tell your friends about us so they can be friends of ours too.